My name's Beth. I'm a PhD student in the Proton Therapy group in Manchester in the UK. I knew I wanted to do my PhD in proton therapy. I'd done a project on particle therapy during my undergraduate physics degree and was really keen to learn more, particularly with the opening of the Proton Centre at the Christie Hospital in Manchester. And I started my PhD in 2018, kind of around the time Flash was getting really big. And the original scope of my PhD was to investigate how we can improve the biological effectiveness of proton therapy. And from the studies by the Lausanne group coming out at the time, Flash just seemed like one of the best ways we could do that. So I'm working on using in silico modeling techniques to explore mechanisms for Flash and to try and establish and hone in on the parameter space or the conditions needed for the Flash sparing effect to operate. So at this stage of determining the Flash mechanism, there are a lot of unknowns, a lot of mechanisms which could be working in combination, a lot of parameters. And so by using computational models, we can perform a large magnitude of coarse measurements before honing in on the more likely mechanisms and parameters in a more informed way. And by understanding the mechanisms and the conditions needed for Flash to operate, it means we can really optimize the effect and ultimately achieve better outcomes for patients. Working in such a multidisciplinary field, there are of course a lot of challenges. My background in physics and sort of computational modeling means I can approach the sort of general problems of Flash in terms of determining the mechanism and looking at the more likely ways that Flash could operate. I can approach that in a more computational way, looking at it in a very sort of fundamental approach. It means we can look at Flash from a very broad perspective before honing in on particular mechanisms and parameters which could inform biological experiments and the other sort of pathways which will all come together to help us create that full picture of why Flash happens and how we can use it to benefit patients. So I think most people starting out in the field of particle therapy or Flash often have a background in maybe one discipline. So I think there's always a challenge to starting work in such a multidisciplinary field. And I think my advice would be to build a good network of people across as many subject areas as possible to be able to talk to and learn from. And of course, to always keep an open mind to different perspectives, different ways of approaching things so that we can learn from each other. I think Flash definitely has a future in radiotherapy. There are still a lot of hurdles in terms of clinical translation and a lot of ways in which current clinical protocols in radiotherapy maybe aren't necessarily compatible with Flash at this stage. So to me, it seems like Flash will be developed as an alternative form of radiotherapy treatment that will sit alongside other treatments, perhaps be used for special cases. How it will progress over the longer term, we'll have to wait and see. Working in such a multidisciplinary field, it's so important to bring experts together across all relevant subject areas. It means we can look to understand the effects of Flash and particle therapy at every stage, from the physics of how particles interact with matter, the chemistry of the reactions take place, through to the biological effects, potential for clinical translation and more, creating that full picture that will really benefit patients. And so the FRPT conference is such a great opportunity to bring together those experts from across so many different disciplines, but with the single goal of improving our collective understanding of Flash and particle therapy. And so it's definitely something I'd want to be a part of.